Yes.
Hurrah! Let's get started. This is Elana. I'm on Twitter a little too much as Elana_Brooklyn. I pronounce she or they, and when I'm not teaching digital strategy to nonprofit organizations, which is actually what I do. I'm also a former labor union organizer. I host the podcast's Graphic Policy Radio, where comics and politics meet, which I've been doing queer analysis and conversation of comics since 2012, and a brand new one I launched called Deep Space Dive, which is like Deep Space Nine, as discussed by uh, experts on different policy and politics areas and activists and the like. And co-presenting with me are the wonderful.
I'm Jay Edidin. I'm a writer and editor. I also podcast. It's half of Jay and Miles Explain the X-Men, which is exactly what it says on the tin. Basically a deep dive into the history and continuity, but also social context of X-Men comics. I've been in the comics industry for a very long time, like 18 years, 17 years, since 2006. So it's been 15 years. Again, as an editor and writer, and I'm about to make a massive shift and start a human rights MA program. So all over the place. And Elana and I have done this. You may have been here a year or 2 years ago when we did this with a giant tablet of paper and markers. This is much smoother, and also half again as good because we've got a third presenter who is fantastic, and you should switch to.
Ta-da!
Hi, everyone. I'm Porshea Patterson-Hurst. I do a lot of nerd stuff, mostly with Black Girls Create. I do a lot of book reviews there, which is like my primary fandoms is just reading books, and especially like fantasy books. I'm really into those. And then those actually become properties in other forms sometimes. So then I become part of that as well. I also am the research manager at the Opportunity Agenda, which is a nonprofit based in New York City that works to do messaging and messaging guidance with different advocacy groups especially on topics and initiatives that are regarding intersectional politics, including economic justice, racial justice, and immigration. I am also, as part of my nerddom, part of this small little Twitter thing that we have called Things We Imagine. It's where my co-host and I talk to different creators about their creative process, and also are engaging about our own creative processes. We're both writers of some sort. And if you are interested in joining us, all the apps and things are on this slide.
Woohoo! So let's get a definition together first. What is fan activism? Fan activism is when fans work together to use our skills and passions to fight for a finer world. I love this art by Jermaine Dickerson, and I memed it for "We Are the Wakandans We've Been Waiting For," which I'm not saying that I am the Wakandan on account of the fact that I am white, but yeah, like the idea that we imagine ourselves as from the stories and we bring that perspective to what we're doing in the real world. I really love this longer definition from Steve Duncombe, which is activists and fans are very similar. Both of us are exponents for the things we believe in, whether it's a comic we love or a movement we're joining. We are collectively a group of people who talk and share about imagining a better world and then working to make that real. The ability, just a shorter version of the quote, the ability to imagine alternatives and build community, not coincidentally, is a basic prerequisite for political activism. So who's been in a fan activism workshop with us before? Throw your hand up in the chat. I'm trying to get a sense of the room. Or the hand signal for a thumb up or some such. Okay. A couple folks and lots of new people. Helpful to know. So additionally, let's see what you guys are doing. Raise your hand or thumb if you make art, like fan art or fine art, any kind of art, memes, GIFs, write fanfic or write meta or write reviews, make fanzines. If you're active on social media platforms with other fans like Tumblr, Twitter, YouTube, if you understand TikTok, perhaps that one as well. Or if you organize events or if you even cosplay, put your thumbs up. And it doesn't even mean you do it well, just that you do it at all. So these are all skills that are useful and powerful for activism, and that can be used for fighting for social change. So you're coming in here with a great skill set. One of the first tips that I give people who are looking into fan activism is to look at organizations that already exist that are doing awesome work that could use your creativity and your skills. I assure you, none of them have enough staff to do all of the communications work that they want to do. And you, as a person with ties in these communities, can bring a fresh perspective, your creativity. Like, I love to use fan art in our visual communications for organizations. Resist Trump Tuesdays Princess Leia meme was made by a random supporter online, and I reached out to them and said, "Can we use this?" And they said yes. I do love this gift. Yes.
So I and doing like when I've explained my job at Opportunity Agenda earlier, you might have wondered what does that have to do with fandom. Well, we are currently doing a study on TV episodes from this season of 2017-2018, looking at how income inequality, not just like just disparities, like what are the characters, what are we seeing in the TV shows. And I'm thinking about, when I was thinking about fandoms, Jay helpfully reminded me about like how the fandoms are engaged on talking about how Batman, whenever the people are actively talking about like economic disparities and stuff, Batman tends to be the poster boy of, yeah, F this rich guy. You can go to the next slide. Which, oh, how did that happen?
Oh, no, is this one?
Yeah.
What you want? Okay.
Yeah. So that's what we're doing with our Power Pop Culture Report, Observing Income on Television. Next slide, please. And so we're working to, as Opportunity, like our whole strategy is working to advance the impact of social justice in the social justice community. We have reports, toolkits, and guides, trainings, webinars, as well as like communication and culture fellows programs where people who are advocates come to us and we give them some guidance on how to think through messaging strategy and talk to reporters and write op-eds, etc. You can go to the next. I already explained who we are. And so our core principles that we use to guide these discussions always center leading with shared values, promoting solutions to the problems that we're seeing, using a similar and familiar themes and metaphors to tell the systemic story about what it is that we're hoping to see some movement and shifting on. In fandom, there's an already like very explosive audience within fandom that's already engaged with a work and already interested in the world and what's been crafted there. And so we hope to invoke like the parallels and the values that are inside of these fandoms to engage with some of the values that we see coming up, like we do with Batman and his inequality and how he treats things. Like he throws his money at weapons and toys instead of building up the communities that are having the problems and putting people in Arkham. They actually probably need better mental health care. So if we were to talk to Batman, we would want to decide, like, you know, work through some like narrative development. And for fandoms, and like right now for our report that we're doing, I'm really interested in engaging with fans because narrative development and fan studies experts are engaging with the strength that fandoms and people within these audiences already have a moving discussion and already are engaging in, and using that to better equip people with talking about these things and perhaps making a shift in culture and in policy. If you can move on to the next one. So with the TV scan, we studied 105 episodes from the 2017 to 2018 TV season, stories dedicated to working class / low-wage households as primary focus. So that was a lot of like Superstore, Shameless, a little bit of the middle so shows that we know are, and Bob's Burgers. And we're like trying to focus on those, but we did do a broad sweep to see what it looked like generally, and then also in those specific shows that we know did talk about more low wage households. We also, this is the season that we included that included Iron Fist and Daredevil from Netflix. So there were some interesting, disparities to be talked about there as well. Some notable early findings are that like around 90% of the shows that are focusing on low-wage workers, the ones like I just mentioned, they tend to be comedic. And another one is that healthcare is the most commonly used topic that is used to engage with people with the discussion about being poor, being in debt, having an issue. For instance, in a Superstore episode, Mateo has an ear infection and he can't afford to go to the doctor, so he ends up doing these random remedies that his coworkers ask him to do, and then they also end up using this as a discussion point to talk about healthcare and coming through with mutual aid. So we're hoping when it comes to talking to fandom audiences about this stuff, we want to find out how do and when do fans engage and talk about income disparity and wealth inequality within the different properties that they're fans of, and what aspects of these properties make them more or less fruitful for these discussions among fans. So if y'all have any ideas about that, like which fandoms you think are really good about that, please just drop that in the chat. I would love to engage more and see what's going on there. If you think there's are may not be talking about it very largely, but it's a good place to start, I would love to hear that as well.
I love that Jay and I were talking, and I think Jay, you said like Stephanie Brown fans are going to have feelings. So real quick, because we got this a little bit out of order. Yeah, like I even when it comes to like strategic cosplay, i.e., literally going to existing protests and actions in costumes that tell the story of the struggle that you're highlighting, like that is also incredibly valid. So like you guys are bringing skills to the table already that movements and organizations need. But I want to go to Jay, who will be talking about a case study about making change within the comics industry.
A bit of backstory here. I was an editor at Dark Comics from 2006 to 2013, and I left for a lot of reasons and was at that point still married to someone who worked there with whom I split sometime afterwards. During that time, I had brought up repeatedly, and I wasn't out as trans while I worked there for a lot of reasons, one of which was that Dark Horse's official insurance policy had an absolute ban on any kind of coverage for any kind of gender affirming care, including mental health care, which I'm not going to go into why this is an issue beyond the obvious discrimination, but if you Google the phrase trans broken arm, you'll get a fairly wide range. Basically, it can be used to deny coverage of everything. And I'd been pushing for this internally for years, and my ex had been pushing for this internally. We had met with the ACLU legal director for Oregon about possible avenues for this. And they basically said, look, yeah, public pressure campaign is going to be your best deal because what they're doing is technically legal because they're a company under a certain size. Because my ex was working there, it had been very, very clear that anything that I did or said, I was doing investigative reporting on the comics industry at this point, and it had become increasingly clear that the company was entirely fine with the idea of taking retaliatory action against my ex based on stuff so it took a while, and it took until we were very much split for me to actually be comfortable bringing this up. But Dark Horse posted a massive "We support LGBT people" thing for Pride a few years ago, and I kind of snapped and hit a line. And at that point, I had 5 figures of Twitter followers. I had a fairly large platform, and I had a reputation. Can we go on to the next slide? Because this is where I'm going to talk strategy. Actually, the next one after that. And the reason I did it at that point was a fair idea going in of what I had on my side and basically that I had enough going in to make it worth taking the risks I was going to take and to have a significant chance of either success or at least fairly wide visibility and progress. So I'm going over this because this is a point that I think is incredibly important when you're doing any kind of fan-based or popular-based activism, and that is to know your assets. And often, as Elana said, those might be things that you don't initially think of as assets, like a Twitter presence, like cosplay experience, like insider or institutional knowledge of the organization you're targeting. So for instance, I knew the president of Dark Horse is incredibly protective of his reputation as a good guy. He wants to be seen as the nicest person in the room and someone whose employees love him and someone who always does the right thing, which can be a massive, massive problem when trying to get him to actually do the right thing, but does make him susceptible to public pressure. So I thought, okay, well, I can use that. Understanding of news cycles and relationships with journalists. If you're going to start a campaign like this, having an idea of who reports on this type of thing and who tends to listen is hugely useful. Knowing which venues take fan activism seriously, take the industry that you're talking about seriously. So for example, a lot of big venues don't really cover comics or comics industry stuff. That's an issue that I had and something I'd experienced when I was trying to place a much larger comics related story years before. But that gave me a really clear idea of who to go to and who to talk to about this. I had a substantial social media presence and following, and also was connected to people with the larger ones. And I had relationships with industry professionals, including highly visible industry professionals. So I knew that I knew that there were people I could message and say, we're writing this open letter, having your name on it would mean a lot. Who would respond or who would raise that signal. And most importantly, unfortunately, with this one is that I was in a position where I could afford to burn bridges. I was working primarily and making a living primarily that didn't require me to have regular work in the comics industry at that point, because that was a serious risk going in for this. And it's something that has frankly cost me jobs since. But I can do that and it felt like it was worth it. So knowing what you have going in and using that to build, and then using those assets to build a strategy with what you've got or what you know you can get is critical, both to getting stuff done and to getting stuff done within your means, to not try to take down a mountain with a bunch of forks unless you know that you've got a whole lot of forks to go with. So what we did, I started a public pressure campaign basically on Twitter, but I also got friends who were in this industry who weren't me, but who had working relationships with Dark Horse to start organizing an open letter campaign. And the open letter campaign was what ultimately made all the difference, because Dark Horse really didn't want that letter to go public. It was shared to a bunch of people, one of whom privately shared with them the names of the signers on it. And they panicked and they reversed their stance, basically the night before it was supposed to go public. So even if you're not, so the potential of a huge public fuss is something that has tremendous power to it. Now this is sort of a weird space, because I was coming at this less as a fan than as a professional, but I was using tools that are built in and around fandom, and I was doing it in an industry where the line between fan and professional is very thin, and where fan engagement was really critical for getting this done. And there's one of us has a siren. I think it's mine. I live right by a fire station, so if you hear sirens, sorry, that's going to happen. But yeah, so those two things in combination, and at the same time, there were fans sort of just hammering away at them on Twitter about this stuff, because again, I'd spent years basically building up visibility as a critic who discussed and primarily focused on LGBTQ issues in and around the comics industry, and harassment issues and labor issues in comics. So the people who were following me and who were in a position to comment picked up on that very quickly. The other thing that really helped in this, in terms of the ask, was that it was a very simple one. There was one really straightforward goal, which was make your employee healthcare coverage trans inclusive. It was something that could be expressed as simply as someone saying, "Come on, Dark Horse, do the right thing," because it was something that was spread around. So having something, if you're primarily talking on social media, and especially if you're primarily based on a platform like Twitter that can be distilled down to a phrase or a hashtag, can be hugely useful too. I think that's pretty much what I've got. Does that basically cover it?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say like this is one of the things that's important about building community and fandom is that like you have a community of people who can come together and make enough of an impact. And so we regularly go through moments where people will be like, "Oh my God, it's time to boycott Marvel," and then my answer is always like, "Do you have enough people to make that successful? Because if you don't, you're actually making us look weak. And there's other tactics that we can do instead of pulling a boycott." Jay knew that he had the relationships necessary to, like, I'm not saying you can only do campaigns you're going to win. That's not what I'm saying. But Jay had a realistic, recognition that like Dark Horse Comics is not the largest company in the history of mankind, and he has the relationships with people and the audience that can make this happen. I wanted to, since you mentioned hashtags, this is part of what I do in my job is tell people these things. If you're coming up with a hashtag, you don't want to make it super long and you don't want to make it super confusing. Like acronyms, not great. You never want to use more, for the love of God, never use more than one hashtag for a campaign you're launching, because then you'll never get enough concentrated Twitter action around that one hashtag. So like for the give Elsa a girlfriend, like that was it. Give Elsa a girlfriend. Don't make up a second, like Elsa should have a girlfriend. Well, that stuff won't count towards the actual virality of something. And never do more than 2 hashtags in a tweet. This Wakanda the Vote effort was kind of my favorite thing ever. They were registering people to vote who were waiting in line to see Black Panther. And that meant that they could use the hashtags Black Panther, which was trending in the world at the time, and then their own hashtag that expressed the movement, which was hashtag Wakanda the Vote. 2 hashtags. And you're using the virality of Black Panther to do what? Promote voter registration in Black and Brown communities. So what is their goal? That's the goal. And that was concrete. Some other goals that I know folks in the movement had are things like setting up better anti-harassment policies or inclusion policies at cons. Another goal could be like there's an important immigrant rights march in your community and the press doesn't really cover these enough, and you think there's maybe ways that you can bring some visual creativity in signs or costumes or whatever to make it more compelling, get better news coverage. Like start from what is your goal, and it has to be specific enough that you can articulate it to people. Decide who are your decision makers. Is it a specific corporation? Who within that corporation is the decision maker for this? I know Jay has suggestions on determining those things.
The things that's really helpful to know if you're talking to a large corporation, let's go with Marvel as an example, just because that's the one you mentioned before, is knowing who's going to have the power to do the things that you want to do. If you want Captain America, if your goal, if your campaign is Captain America should have a boyfriend.
He should.
He should. I agree. I agree hard. When your campaign is that Captain America should have a boyfriend, that's a decision that's ultimately going to be coming from very, very, very high up in editorial and publishing. I would probably guess, tweeting at individual cap writers, the idea and that you support this is great. Holding them accountable for whether it happens is less useful because ultimately that's not a choice that's in their hands. There are people who can propose it. They're not people who can approve it. That's likely also even true of book and line editors. Like this is coming from the very top. So going after the organization itself, going after high levels of management is going to be critical there. But again, it's a place where you can get the people who are coming in. You can get allies in creative voices and editorial voices who can be part of your movement and part of the pressure to do that. They're just not necessarily going to be the people who have the power to actually make it come through.
And like you can approach them with the perspective that this person is a potential ally. Like don't assume, unless, like you might have proof because they've written shit that's fucked up, but like don't assume that this isn't happening because they think that gay people are terrible. Like you could say, Bob, wouldn't it be awesome if, and realize that the target, the blocker, is not that editor necessarily.
If there's something that drives me a little bit up the wall about the way these conversations play out on Twitter, is that if there is an obvious point of inclusion that is written out or neglected, odds are very, very good that the person writing on that comic tried to get it through and was shot down and has a contract that forbids them from telling you that. So again, know not only who the obvious creative credit is, but where the actual accountability process goes. And that's something that a lot of folks can't talk about. Like you can't generally say, well, I tried to do this specific thing and my editor was for it, and then the editor in chief said no. But you can say, well, when I do a comic, it has to go through these layers of approvals, and anything that counts as significant change to a character, which includes things like romantic relationships, has to be approved by the editor in chief. And that's something, I mean, like, approvals processes are fascinating, and so that there's something that folks are often willing to discuss as long as it's not a specific example. So doing some research and looking at that and figuring out where the buck actually stops is absolutely critical to getting stuff in. And it's also absolutely critical to maintaining and preserving allies who are in positions of medium power, so like writers and editors. Because when you come in being like, you asshole, your cap is straight, homophobe, which again, this is, I'm going ultra extreme because this is an example and it's ridiculous. That kind of shuts off that relationship from the start.
And Jay, do you think it's useful, like, for people to tweet positive, like, oh my gosh, the queer subtext in this is so strong, I hope it gets to be taken in that direction? Like, is there a way that a writer might show someone higher up to be like, look at all this positive support the storyline has? Don't you think this could be good?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Especially at smaller companies, those individuals from fans make a huge difference. Especially and doubly if you take the time to actually like write an email or write a letter to a company. A lot of companies have started bringing back letters columns, and the amount of weight that fan feedback gets when it's formal communication versus social media is pretty substantial.
So the social media is for you to connect with other fans so that it's not just you making the ask, or sometimes the social media is about making the company feel the heat when it gets to an inflection point, but the actually being heard as a fan piece might come from a direct private email or a letter to the editor or something like that.
Really quickly, another really good way to engage with creators when there's something you want but didn't get is something like, I wish we had seen X. Who's someone we could ask about that?
Oh.
Sometimes the answer is me and I just couldn't do it, but often they can say, you know, that's a higher up question or something like that, to talk about what you want to see and what you'd like. Because folks will be much more likely to refer you on if you're talking in those terms than who do I tell they fucked up.
A key term we use in organizing is the ask, which is, what are you asking supporters to do? Sometimes it's making a donation to a particular cause. Sometimes it's signing a petition or a pledge, or sending an email to a decision maker, or doing a tweet. But you got to be concrete in what you are asking people to do, or else they'll go and do random stuff that might not be organized, right? The point is organizing, getting multiple people to do something together to create a change. Let's go back in time with a classic example. Portia, do you want to do this one?
Yeah. So Fandom Forward, which was known pre, I guess, June 2021 as the Harry Potter Alliance, they once had a campaign about recognizing like Protego actually is like a spell in the Harry Potter universe. Sorry, we're gonna go, like, we all have we're not engaging, like, I'm a board member with Fandom Forward, we're no longer engaging with the property as our primary property to discuss these different issues. At the time, very interestingly, the like the system, the thing has always been to be pro queer rights and trans rights, and so Protego was part of that. And here is one of their primary actions was Protego campaign was about making sure that there was direct action when it came to all these restrictions being made on going to the restrooms, and it being across different states and all these different things. And so there were in real life protests. There was a postcard campaign, and it led to a level of change and motion that was all fan led, using the concept of Protego and like being protective of this very important group, and using that protection to help people see that it's in our like in everyone's best like rights to to be against like being exclusive when it comes to restrooms. And so that's what this campaign particularly was about. And like when it comes to like just making sure being active and galvanizing a fandom to do work, that's what Fandom Forward has always been really great about. And like Jay's letter, they also have letter campaigns about doing like protecting your libraries, like whenever libraries go for budget, like we have like letter writing campaigns like for representatives. So it's very a lot of policy forward and policymaker forward work going on from Fandom Forward. And right now they're going to be doing a lot of stuff on democracy. So you're going to continue to see a pattern of pushing for policy change.
And so like with the bathroom campaigns, I know that was very much focused at the state level, right?
Yeah.
So you guys were doing things at the level of government that had control over the thing you wanted to change, for example.
Yeah.
and
Also, Stop
like
the Snatchers was with immigration and like
yeah.
centers. So it's like always very like state or like federal level issues.
And one of the things that's really cool about HPA becoming Fandom Forward is it really is making it clearer that you guys are multi-fandom. And I would love to see, like, I just have never seen a fan community get as organized for an activism purpose as HPA had been. And now I'm really hoping that folks from other fandoms will join in and like use these structures and lessons and learnings, because like they invented the fan activism discipline in a way. I mean, actually fan activism was invented by queers and also heterosexual women who demanded Star Trek get back on the air. But other than that, like HPA invented fan activism in a lot of ways. So
yeah, and we've had fandom. We got Fandom Forward name from our Fandom Forward toolkits that we've had for a long time, and those include. Goodness gracious, they include Wonder Woman, Avatar: Last Airbender, Pokemon to look at things like climate justice and gender rights. And then also there was a Black Panther one that was related to Wakanda the Vote and also just like talking about racial justice. So Fandom Forward has always been about engaging different fandoms. And if you want to check out the website, you can see those different toolkits and how we try to engage with different fandoms.
They're really good guys, like for real, like take a look. So this is sort of a question that folks can bat around in the chat. What are the issues or campaigns that you want to work on, whether it's something within fandom or something that is like beyond the fandom? And it could be anything from a slogan to an actual campaign idea. I would love to see some folks' campaigns that you're interested in, or it could be something you're already working on and doing. Yes, trans equity and representation in comics fan spaces. Thank you, Danny. Such a valuable voice on that as well. I'm sorry, I'm just keeping up on the chat because I wasn't able to really keep an eye on it enough. This is great. Was somebody asking for us to share slides afterwards?
Yeah. Do you see the Q&A? Danny's.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, sorry, they're in the Q&A tab. But yes, we will share the PowerPoint slides after the presentation. Definitely can do that. I'll make a bit.ly link and throw that in here. Danny, I feel like we answered this question, but please, like if we did not, and Jay, I like this is kind of a good one for you. The question was, what strategies do y'all think are the best for building alliance and solidarity with creators that is enabling them to be vocal and participate by doing so safely?
I can go into a little bit more detail on that if you'd like. But I think we covered it generally. In general, I would basically just be aware that most contracts don't allow people to talk directly about their experiences working with the contractor. And that in itself is a labor issue that's worth addressing. So actually, the biggest things there I would say is be aware of the freelancer labor issues at play in the comics industry, because they're massive. And the power imbalance is phenomenally large. There's a lot of conversation about this stuff and about comics and unions. Joan Hilty is a tremendously good person to follow and to talk to about that stuff. She was an editor at DC for years and now primarily teaches. But yeah, be aware of the labor issues and be aware of the power imbalances and go in with those in mind the way you would when you're talking to anyone else who's in a comparatively vulnerable position with an organization. in general,
Thank you.
assuming good intentions helps. Most people writing comics, and especially if you know a creator is queer or is a creator of color, is a female creator, is coming from a marginalized position at all, odds are very good that they're going to be on your side philosophically, whether or not they can enact that practically. So going in, seeing them as potential allies and asking for their engagement rather than necessarily a specific task, is usually a pretty helpful way to go in.
I think this dovetails well with this slide on messaging, which are like, what are the stories that will persuade people to take action? You know, I know with Fandom 4, they had the Superman as an immigrant campaign, which like was an amazing framing of who Superman is and that identity, and really did some amazing work catalyzing superhero fans to talk about immigrant rights. Understanding what your timeline is, your tone, who your messengers are. And like I talk about hashtags a lot, but they're useful tools for connecting messages to each other. I may have a worksheet that I'll put oh, right, I can't click on this. uh, if you go to bit.ly/flame worksheet, it has to be this capitalization. There's a worksheet that you guys can take with you and use as a resource for making your own game plans. It'll walk you through what is the action you want folks to take, who are the people who can join us, what actions should they take, what tools we're using to communicate, how do we communicate with supporters, and how do we keep things meaningful and fun. Meaningful and fun is key. Oh, I also would just say, like, don't use change.org petitions. Change.org doesn't let you maintain the contact information for the people who've signed your petition. So you're building their email list and not your own. I always recommend people, if you're making a petition, an online petition, or a click here to send an email to this particular target or whatever kind of action Network is a free tool that is run by a nonprofit founded by my former boss at the Labor Union Unite here, that you can use, where you will have the contact information of the people who sign your petition. And like, organizing is an exercise in making lists. It's making a contact list of the people who you can get together to take action together. So you need to have those people's contact information. So no change.org petitions. Yes, Action Network petitions. They're very easy to use. Like, if you know how to make a change.org petition, you can make an Action Network petition. Like, if you don't know how to code, it might not be fancy looking, but it'll be completely functional. So use the platform that'll let you have your contacts from people. Very important. I always, like, again, recommending folks partner with nonprofits or mutual aid organizations or existing organizations that are doing work on the issues you care about. Like, Google, see who's out there, take a look on social. If there are activists who you follow online, for example, who speak about these issues, you can reach out to them and find out also which organizations are really doing the work and which ones are kind of, let's say, attention hogs. There's certainly a lot of nonprofits that come off like they're doing a lot and aren't. And there also are sometimes people who misunderstand what certain nonprofits do. They do certain things and not other things. Like, for example, I mean, people are always asking the ACLU to do stuff that the ACL doesn't actually do. And I love the ACLU, but, you know, figure out who are some aligned institutions if you're beginning a campaign. You know, like, as much as we get frustrated when GLAAD doesn't list colorists and letterers and their comics awards, GLAAD is an organization that cares about having diversity in comics. Like, think about when we had a really insanely transphobic thing happen in an Image comic years ago. I went right to GLAAD and they didn't say to me, who's Image Comics? Or like, is this about Superman? No, they were like, oh, an high profile indie comic did something messed up. We're going to work with you to like get a response from the creators about how they shouldn't do that. So, allies.
Building on the point on allies, it's really, I think a lot of us who are in fandom come from DIY backgrounds. And we tend to go in thinking we can do everything ourselves or we can put everything together. And so we end up reinventing a lot of wheels that have not only previously been invented, but maybe refined in a lot of ways that we're not in a position to. And using that networking to reach out and really being willing to collaborate and build on stuff that other folks and other other organizations have done. Yeah, as Danny just said in the chat, sharing power and building power is critically important, and I think something worth writing down and reminding yourself of if, again, you're coming from fandom and a DIY background. Because I know for me, it's easy to forget both that there are resources out there and that there are folks who are going to be on my side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if there's any space that understands the importance of media in creating cultural shifts, like queer organizations do understand that. I feel sometimes I'm like trying to convince certain other issue organizations that narrative and popular culture representations are significant. But with queer groups, they know this. They know this. So if that's issues you're talking about, you have a pretty soft audience to reach out to when it comes to the nonprofit partners. This is really important. Saul Alinsky, author of Rules for Radicals, sort of the father of a lot of the community organizing tools we all use, says a good tactic is one that your people enjoy. So I've done organizing with worker groups, for example, where folks did not like to do stuff online. And so asking them to do stuff online was not going to be a thing that they would engage in repeatedly or keep doing. And I've been involved in other worker organizing campaigns where the community was extremely online and very happy to tweet at a company and very happy to reach out to their allies online. People are doing this activism not because they're being paid. So thinking about what are the tactics that your community will enjoy and helping them with that as part of your strategy is going to be important for success. Things that are not fun are things that people probably won't do, and they can be draining too. So keep that in mind. I want to go back and just look at some of the more questions. And I can't click on this FlameCon worksheet. Let's see who we have here. I got stuff in chat. I see the Q&A. Nick, which Nick's question was, is there a way to help the creators that can't be vocal about their stances? I think we sort of hit some of that, but if you have other thoughts, let's get those too.
In general, up when you can is pretty critical. Not necessarily jumping on a creator when they're not able to do something that was originally presented or was originally expected of them. And I think especially bearing in mind that queer creators end up getting the worst of both ends of the stick here, and that often they come in and are promoted as that adds to the diversity of a line, and then aren't allowed to follow through with that, and so take a lot of pushback from queer fans. So I guess again, just being aware of and sympathetic to those possibilities.
I've heard that so much from Black writers specifically as well. Yeah. Oh my God.
Another thing to do is if you are in a position to, if you are an agent, or if you know agents, approach comics writers. I have a magical Marvel contract from the work I've done with them that allows me to actually talk about pretty much whatever I want to, because my agent was able to negotiate that. There's no way in hell that I would have gotten that on my own. So adding layers of advocacy and helping people find those layers of advocacy can be a huge, huge help.
Benji put in the chat, queerphobic and racist practices in the entertainment industry as being an issue that they want to work on. And hell yes. It's been interesting to see actual screenwriters talking about these problems, predominantly in Twitter is where I'm seeing that now, which I think can be enlightening for us to understand what people are going through. I think that the whole support the art you want to see in the world thing is really real, obviously, and that's one of the reasons why you should all go to the booths and give the creators doing independent work your money right away after this workshop. But there is also something we know that we're never going to have the massive millions and billions of people viewing us as some of the big commercial enterprises are going to have, and it is still important for us to support actual hiring practices in the entertainment industry because of the size of the platforms available to them. I know that Color of Change is an organization who does a ton of pop culture savvy work around and has made like successfully gotten shows to hire more Black writers. Like that is a thing that they have done. And I would love to, check in and see what those campaigns are looking like right now. And they might have ideas of how fans can continue to support them. I love this point from MJ, meet people where they are all the time. I am always trying to move people left and move people towards more radical action. But like the first thing I ask a friend to do when they want to get involved in community organizing is I'm not asking them to go and get arrested at a protest. That's not step one, right? That's like farther down the road of people's radicalization. I am first going to ask them something which they feel comfortable to do, that they want to do, and start from there. I think that's a key part of meeting people where they are. We have 6 minutes left. I cannot believe I made it through slides because there's like so much. And I have a lot of old slides that I like got rid of. And I want to see if there's anything to pull that we want to pull out from here. Nah, not really. Boop, boop, boop. Let's keep getting the
I've got something that we did not touch on.
Yes.
Is awareness campaigns. A lot of the time when there's something missing, I want to talk briefly about something called the Convention Anti-Harassment Project, which is a big part of why conventions now largely have harassment policies that are listed. This is a project that started at girlwonder.org years and years and years ago.
RIP.
Yeah, it's still around. There's still, the forum at least is still alive, I think.
Oh,
but it has been for a pretty long time. But the idea was basically to get conventions to have harassment policies that were clearly articulated, that were enforced and involved training. And what we largely did was reach out to conventions, say, do you have this? Would you like to have this? Can we help you make this? And the overwhelming answers were no and yes, respectively. So a lot of the time with something like that, or with diversity initiatives, with harassment initiatives and code of conduct initiatives, a lot of the time just offering resources can be a form of activism in and of itself. And
that's so true.
Because especially smaller events and especially fan-based organizations don't necessarily have a ton going in. Like they've got the frame of reference of, the 6 people who founded it who do all of the work around their day jobs. And so coming in and offering something like that can be incredibly productive and incredibly valuable. Just on its own.
Dean Spade. What's that, Danny? Oh, it has a book on mutual aid. Cool. And Sarah mentions Sarah C. I think this is the Sarah who I know. Meeting people where they are. If you look up Art of Dialogue, there's some incredible organizing in museums about how to facilitate conversations that help people consider new points of view. Yeah, that's true. Like, we're not the first people to be tackling these questions, and there's research done that we can use and reference.
Also want to note opportunity agendas, the process of values, solutions, problems, actions, like using fandoms, the way that I'm going to go back to like all of the examples that have been used today are actually like not unintentionally or intentionally have been using this formula that we have. But the Fandom Forward campaign for I'll use for Protego, right? Like there's a shared value there, right, of protecting trans rights. And then the solution, the problem is that they were trying to keep trans people from being able to access the restrooms, or still are. Solution is to target the people who are in power and try to ask them, like, move them to change their policy, set their mindset on this policy, and actually actively move towards the action that we want them to do. The way to do that is to build up a team of collaborators, work with different groups. These are all steps that we've been talking about this whole presentation that are BPSA. And some fandoms are already built in with their own levels of values that we're all gathering together because we value certain things. Are certain groups of fans more likely to be less involved with the value that you identified? Probably yes, because we're not a monolith, right? But there are a lot of values that we can see and share that when you start trying to have conversations with people, you build it with the presenting your value set that you know that is probably shared, because you're in the same fandom, and then use that to build out the rest of your solution process.
I mean, that's a really great point too about the different values of fandoms. I listen to a ton of heavy metal music, and I have not successfully identified a ton other than the anarchist contemporary metal event that Kim Kelly organized in New York. Like, I haven't found a ton of community in there of people who want to do the things I want to do, but the X-Men fandom, perhaps, maybe a fandom I'm in which there are more people who are seeking to make the changes I'd like to see in the world. These are good dovetail questions from MJ. What fan activism campaigns are you panelists currently involved in or hoping to see grow? Does anybody want to take that?
I'm thinking through what Fandom Forward is about to do right now. So we're Fandom Forward is currently in a genesis phase. We're moving things forward. I'm trying to think of what can I share right now, because I know there's a lot of things going on. I know that they're actively staying on top of the democracy angle, not only in getting voting drives and getting people registered, but also in the concept of what is going on with limiting access to voting, and issues with language and just general accessibility. And I know that's going to be ongoing, and I'm really interested in what's going on with democracy in general, and what avenues can be used with fandom to kind of make it a more equitable and generate stuff with the government to actually move forward with that. And then generally, I just love seeing different parts of fandom being engaged.
I have put my email in the chat. Do not hesitate to email me. I can share folks slides. I know that the next room on wellness. Oh my God, I should probably go to this one. Is coming in. So don't hesitate to reach out to us. We have resources. We can share slides with you, and we want to hear your ideas and your feedback as well. So thank you for coming out and joining us. Oh, good. And some more good links in here to the toolkit from Opportunity Agenda. Thank you to my co-presenters, Jay and Porshea. I love you guys. I really mean it. And thank you to all the attendees.
Thanks, everybody.
For organizing this.
Oh.